In the early 1990s, the comic book landscape was being dominated by groups of creators leaving the big two publishers in Marvel and DC in an attempt to gain creative and financial freedom. However, while much of the attention was focused on the ballyhooed boys over at Image Comics, a much quieter but just as successful group was starting up at Dark Horse Comics. Now then, where Image boasted a roster of people like Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and Rob Liefeld, creators who are known more for their artwork than for their writing ability, Dark Horse actually boasted a roster of guys like John Byrne and Frank Miller, people who are known for both writing and their artwork. And of that Dark Horse roster, probably the most successful would be Mike Mignola, with his contribution, Hellboy. First appearing in 1993, Hellboy has appeared in multiple comic book miniseries, 2 major Hollywood films, 2 animated films, video games, role-playing games, a collectible card game, and has launched a successful spin-off comic, BPRD. Originally published in issue form in 2001, the Conqueror Worm storyline was eventually collected and released as the 5th volume in the Hellboy trade paperback series. We open up with a brief vignette of a mysterious pulp hero attacking a secret Nazi encampment in Austria. The still unidentified hero takes out several Nazis, but fails to stop them from putting their plan into action, launching a rocket into outer space. Nazis in outer space. Yeah, that'll never work. Flash forward to a Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense briefing 60 years later. The chief explains that the Nazi astronaut was Ernst Omeg, a top-level scientist. Hellboy remarks on how the mission is similar to the final tale of Lobster Johnson. This is quickly dismissed. The Bureau higher-ups then privately talk to Hellboy, voicing concerns over new team member Roger the Homunculus. Now, Roger first appeared in the previous miniseries, Wake the Devil. He is a being constructed mainly of blood and herbs that were stewed in a jar and then incubated in horse manure. He is a lifeless form until energy is poured into a socket located in his chest. Though he protests, Hellboy is given a detonator to a bomb that has been planted in Roger, should he begin to run amok. Hellboy and Roger are then introduced to Agent Laura Karnstein of the Austrian Secret Police, who then begins leading the two towards the castle. The trio then get accosted by an old mountain hermit who it actually turns out is an old Nazi officer. The officer is then taken out by Agent Karnstein because, as it turns out, Q Akbar, Agent Karnstein's real name is Inger, and she is the granddaughter of longtime Hellboy adversary Hermann von Klempt. Hellboy is then taken prisoner by von Klempt's newest Kriegsgaffe, a mind-controlled Nazi supergorilla. Roger, meanwhile, has fallen into a crevasse where he comes across the mysterious pulp hero from the beginning of the story, Lobster Johnson. Debuting in the 2-part Hellboy, the Box of Evil miniseries, Lobster Johnson was a Depression-era vigilante whose various adventures were chronicled across several pulp novels and comic books in the Hellboy universe. These adventures were largely believed to be fictional, hence the BPRD's earlier dismissal of Hellboy's claims. As Roger and Lobster begin making their way through the base in an attempt to reunite with Hellboy, the Von Klemps and the other Nazis eagerly await the return of the Nazi rocket launched back during the war. That is, until Lobster and Roger manage to cut the power off to the castle. Meanwhile, Hellboy comes across a prisoner, later revealed to be an alien, who explains Von Klemt's plan. That Ernst Oeming's dead body was actually sent up into space, and so a demonic entity could then possess it. Then return to Earth, causing the destruction of the entire planet. Just then, Roger arrives and Lobster mysteriously disappears. However, the reunion is short-lived, as that is the moment that the rocket containing the possessed body of Dr. Oeming returns. Ingra puts on a gas mask as gas begins to leak from the capsule. The gas causes the other Nazis to change into monsters. Herman explains that the men are evolving into the next stage of humanity, which is to become food for the entity that is now emerging from the capsule, the Conqueror worm. Herman elaborates, explaining that just as he had lost the will to live, that the spirit of the worm contacted him, explaining that the worm would bring about the end of times, destroying the earth. He also explains to Ingra that the gas mask only protected her mind. Her physical form has changed to that of her men. Meanwhile, Hellboy and Roger do their best to fight off the worm. Hellboy tries using a device the alien gave him. However, it gets destroyed by a Kriegswaffe. Roger then takes it upon himself. He opens up his chest socket and absorbs the worm. As Roger continues to control the spirit of the worm, Hellboy contemplates detonating an explosive in Roger. In one final moment of clarity, Roger grabs Herman von Klemt's head and hurls himself over a cliff. Lobster Johnson then takes out Ingra Walker and then joins Hellboy in locating Roger's body. Roger then uses a makeshift lightning rod to recharge Roger and destroy the worm. Overall, I can't give Hellboy Conqueror Worm any less than an A. It's perfect. It's got great artwork, great storytelling, great action. It serves as a decent jumping on point because it's not entirely bogged down in continuity. All around, it's just great. And well, that brings us to an end of another Random Trade Review. Let's see what we've got coming up next. Okay. I will say this, guys. I do have some DC Comics in here, too. It's random. Join us on Monday, November 17th for... Captain America, the Winter Soldier. And no, I'm not talking about the movie.